The early morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac as a convoy of black luxury cars glided to a stop. Inside the largest vehicle, Ade Okoye watched the airport bustle through the tinted window. After years in the quiet, structured world of American boarding schools, the vibrant energy of Lagos felt both familiar and foreign. He smoothed the fabric of his simple jeans, a stark contrast to the plush leather of the car seat. His billionaire father, Mr. Okoye, had insisted on the grand welcome. He turned to him, his smile warm but carrying a weight of expectation. "Welcome home, Ade." "It's good to be home, Dad," he said, his voice soft. He had insisted he return, to be closer to him, to enroll in Northwood Academy, an elite school known more for its reputation than its education. He saw it as a stepping stone, a place for him to settle in before joining the family business. Ade, however, saw it as a test. As the car door opened, a wave of heat and noise washed over him. He stepped out, his small backpack slung over a plain t-shirt, and immediately felt the weight of a dozen stares. They weren't looking at him, but at the gleaming cars, the sharp-suited drivers, the unmistakable aura of wealth. Ade had spent his teenage years trying to escape that aura, to be seen for who he was, not what his family had. His father wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "I know Northwood Academy will be a good fit for you. Just focus on your studies and enjoy yourself." "I'll do my best, Dad," he replied, hugging him. He loved him, but he didn't want his life. Not the convoy, not the attention, not the assumptions that came with the name Okoye. As they drove toward the family estate, Ade made a quiet decision. At Northwood Academy, he would not be his father's son. He would be himself. He would keep a low profile, avoiding the spotlight his family name always attracted. He would dress simply, and he would trade the chauffeured car for a bicycle. His worth, he promised himself, would be measured by his character, not his father's bank account. The next day, the polished gates of Northwood Academy opened to a parade of expensive vehicles. Engines purred as students stepped out, dressed in crisp, tailored uniforms paired with designer bags and the easy confidence of the wealthy. Amidst the polished metal and brand names, Ade arrived quietly. He parked his modest bicycle near the gate, locked it, and smoothed down his neatly ironed white shirt. He carried a simple bag, free of logos, and his short, neat braids were practical. As he walked through the gates, he felt like a ghost. His classmates' eyes slid over him, barely registering his presence before moving on to the next flashy arrival. The few who did notice him exchanged whispers. Did he really ride a bicycle to school? A girl with a glossy ponytail asked her friend, wrinkling her nose in disbelief. Her friend, adjusting the strap of a leather tote, laughed softly. He must be poor, maybe a scholarship student. Ade heard them. He had expected it. The words were meant to sting, to create a boundary between us and him, but they didn't land. His father's voice echoed in his mind, a phrase he had held onto for years. "You don't need to prove your worth with the flashy things. Your character is your value." Holding onto those words, he walked with a steady pace toward the main building. He wasn't here to impress them. He was here to learn, to read, to find a quiet corner in the library and lose himself in books. The social hierarchy of Northwood Academy, with its unspoken rules and currency of wealth, held no interest for him. He had come for an education, not a competition. Not long after Ade found his classroom, a shiny black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the school's main entrance. The engine cut off, and for a moment the car sat in expectant silence, heads turned. The driver, in a crisp uniform, quickly stepped out and opened the rear door with a flourish. Out came Funke Adewale. She was a vision in a custom-fitted red shirt that stood out against the sea of white. She carried a designer bag, its gold clasp catching the morning sun. Shiny jewelry sparkled at her wrists and ears, and the sharp click of her shoes against the pavement announced her arrival. She paused for a moment, letting the attention settle on her. The students nearby began to murmur, the whispers rippling through the crowd. "That must be her," one boy said, his voice hushed with excitement. "The billionaire's daughter. I heard she just came back from abroad." "Her family is supposed to be super rich," a girl added. "They even donated the new science building to the school." A slow smile spread across Funke's face as she heard them. She didn't correct the rumors, she welcomed them, bathed in them. She loved being the center of attention, the subject of speculation and envy. With her head held high, she walked past everyone with an air of practiced confidence, entering the school building as if she owned it. As she passed, students stared. Some pointed. "Wow, she's so classy," someone said in awe. "Of course she is," another replied. "What do you expect from the daughter of a billionaire?" The story of her wealth, already embellished, traveled faster than she did. By the time she reached the classroom, her reputation had preceded her. She was not just a new student, she was an event. In the classroom, Ade had chosen a seat near the back, by a window that looked out onto a quiet courtyard. His books were stacked neatly on his desk. He watched as Funke made her entrance, commanding the room without saying a word. The other students shifted in their seats, their eyes drifting from Ade's plain shirt and simple bag to Funke's vibrant display of wealth. Funke took a seat near the front, and within seconds, a group of girls had formed a small court around her. They fawned over her, their voices a chorus of admiration. "Your bag is so beautiful," one of them exclaimed. "Is it from Paris?" "Yes," Funke replied, her smile effortless. "My dad got it for me during our last trip. He said I needed something elegant for school." The girls gasped, their faces alight with impressed awe. Funke leaned back in her chair, absorbing their attention like the sun. She had no intention of correcting their assumptions about her father, the big donor everyone was talking about. Their belief was her power. Ade tried to focus on his notebook, the chatter a low hum in the background. But as the whispers grew louder, he couldn't help but catch snippets of the conversation. "She must be the daughter of the new benefactor," one boy said to his friend, glancing at Funke. "Definitely," the other agreed. "Look at her. She's practically glowing with money." Ade shook his head slightly, a small private smile on his face. The gossip didn't bother him. He felt a strange sense of freedom in their mistaken identities. They saw Funke as a rich and glamorous heiress, and Ade as a simple boy who didn't belong. In their world of surfaces, it was an easy conclusion to draw. And for Ade, who wanted nothing more than to be left alone, their assumptions provided the perfect disguise. But it didn't take long for Funke's gaze to land on him. To Funke, Ade's quiet nature wasn't a choice. It was a weakness. His simple clothes weren't a statement. They were a sign of being less important. By the end of the first week, Ade had become a target. "Hey, bike girl," Funke called across the hallway one morning, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did your bicycle break down yet, or do you need a scholarship for a new one?" A few students laughed along with her. Ade stopped and looked at Funke, his eyes calm and steady. "Good morning to you too, Funke," he said softly, and then walked away, leaving Funke's laughter echoing behind him. Funke's determination to isolate Ade only grew. During lunch, she would sit with her friends, whispering loudly enough for others to hear. She spread the rumor that Ade was a scholarship student, a charity case barely scraping by to stay at Northwood Academy. "It's the only way someone like him could afford this school," she told a group of girls, ensuring the story would spread. Soon the labels bike boy and scholarship student followed Ade down the hallways. He ignored the taunts, keeping his focus on his studies, his head buried in a book during breaks. But the constant judgment was a low, persistent hum, a reminder that he was an outsider. Not everyone, however, was quick to join Funke's chorus. Chidi Eze, one of the most popular boys in school, began to notice Ade's quiet strength. He was handsome, intelligent, and from a wealthy family, but he carried his status lightly. He didn't like bullies, and he didn't like the way Funke treated Ade. One day in the cafeteria, Funke was holding court, her voice rising as she loudly mocked Ade's supposed poverty. Chidi, sitting a few tables away, had heard enough. He stood up and walked over to Funke's table. "Funke, do you ever stop talking about other people?" he asked, his voice firm but quiet. The table fell silent. Funke turned to him, surprised by the interruption. "I'm just telling the truth, Chidi. He's more focused on school than gossip, unlike some people," Chidi cut in. His tone was calm but sharp, leaving no room for argument. Without waiting for a response, he walked over to Ade's table, where he sat alone and sat down. He flashed him a kind smile. "Hi, Ade," he said. "Do you mind if I join you?" The entire cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Everyone stared. Funke's face tightened, her knuckles white as she clenched her fists under the table. She had tried and failed several times to get Chidi's attention, and now he was willingly sitting with the very boy she had tried so hard to belittle. Ade looked up from his book, a small, surprised smile touching his lips. "Of course," he said, "thanks." As Chidi started a conversation with Ade, asking about the book he was reading, a subtle shift occurred in the social landscape of Northwood Academy. It was a small act, but in a world governed by image and alliances, it was a statement. Chidi had chosen a side, and in doing so, he had given Ade something he hadn't asked for, but deeply appreciated: a shield. Funke watched them, her jealousy a burning coal in her chest. This was no longer just a game, it was a battle for status, and she had no intention of losing. A few weeks later, the school held its annual charity event, a grand affair where wealthy families showcased their generosity. The evening was a performance of charity, with each donation announced to the assembled students and faculty. Funke saw it as the perfect stage to solidify her position as Northwood Academy's undisputed queen. When her turn came, she walked to the stage with practiced confidence, her red dress a vibrant splash of color against the dark curtains. She took the microphone, a proud smile on her face. "I'd like to donate 5 million naira to the school's charity fund," she announced, her voice clear and ringing. The hall erupted in applause, students whispered in awe, their admiration cementing Funke's image as a generous and wealthy heiress. She returned to her seat, basking in the glow of their approval. Her friends, Zainab and Bayo, showered her with compliments. "That's amazing, Funke," said Zainab, flipping her hair. "Nobody can match your generosity." "Absolutely," Bayo added, his gaze admiring. "You're the star of the school now." Later in the evening, as the next round of donations was announced, a name was called that made the room fall silent. Ade Okoye. The principal's voice echoed through the hall. "Ade has also donated 5 million naira. Every head turned toward the back of the room, where Ade sat quietly, his expression as calm as ever. A wave of confused murmurs swept through the crowd. Where could a scholarship student get that kind of money? Funke's jaw tightened. The applause for Ade was hesitant at first, then grew, fueled by the sheer shock of the announcement. Humiliation washed over Funke. She had been matched, upstaged, by the quiet boy on the bicycle. She leaned over to Zainab and Bayo, her voice a venomous whisper. "Oh, please. Do you know how he got that money? He probably seduced Chidi. He's been spending time with him, hasn't he?" Zainab gasped, covering her mouth dramatically. "You're probably right, Funke." "That's so low," Bayo smirked, eager to stay in Funke's favor. "He's not fooling anyone. Chidi must have paid for his donation." The lie was planted, and it spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, the whispers had a new narrative. Ade hadn't earned that money. He had sold himself for it. Funke made sure to look smug whenever she heard the rumors, relishing the way they chipped away at Ade's unexpected moment of triumph. Ade held his head high, refusing to give the gossip power. But he couldn't deny the weight of the constant judgment. Chidi noticed the change in the way students looked at him and continued to defend him, his loyalty only making Funke's resentment burn hotter. The next morning, as students gathered at the school gate, Funke's shrill voice cut through the usual chatter. She was arguing with a modestly dressed woman who was holding a basket of food. "I told you not to come here," Funke hissed, her eyes darting around nervously. "What if someone sees you?" The woman's face was weary but kind. "Funke, I just wanted to bring you some homemade food." She pleaded softly. "You've been looking thin lately, my child." "I don't want it, and stop calling me that." Funke snatched the basket and pushed it back at the woman. "Just leave before someone notices." The woman's voice broke. "Funke, I'm doing everything I can for you. You know how hard it was for me to convince Mr. Okoye to let you study here. Please don't be ashamed of me." Funke's face went rigid with panic. The mention of Mr. Okoye, her mother's employer, sent a jolt of fear through her. She pushed the woman again, harder this time. "You're embarrassing me. Just go." The woman stumbled backward, losing her balance and falling to the ground. Ade, who had just arrived on his bicycle, froze. His heart ached for the woman, and a hot surge of anger rose in his chest at Funke's cruelty. He dropped his bike and rushed over. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Ade asked gently, helping the woman to her feet. He then turned to Funke, his voice firm and clear. "How could you treat an elderly woman like this?" Funke's mind raced. Bio and a few other students were approaching, their faces curious. Cornered, she lashed out, pointing a trembling finger at the woman. "Oh, don't act so righteous, Ade. Isn't this your mother? Why don't you keep her away from the school gates?" Ade's jaw tightened. "My mother would never be treated like this, because I respect her. What's your excuse?" The crowd murmured, confused. Funk, seeing her lie was not landing, took a step back, her expression icy. "You can't fool anyone, Ade. Stop pretending to be better than you are." Ade ignored her and turned back to the woman. "Let me help you, ma'am," he said softly, guiding her to a nearby bench. "Thank you, my dear," the woman whispered, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and shame. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't cause any trouble," Ade said reassuringly. From a distance, Funke watched them, her stomach churning. Her mother's presence, her simple clothes, her quiet humility, it all threatened to shatter the fragile illusion she had built. She couldn't let anyone find out the truth. Funke's public humiliation at the gate, followed by Ade's quiet act of kindness, grew inside her. Chidi's continued admiration for Ade and the respect he was slowly gaining from other students drove Funke to a new level of desperation. She needed to ruin Ade once and for all. Her plan was simple and cruel. She found a photo of Ade online, one taken at a family lunch. Using a photo editing app, she cropped out everyone else and blurred the background, making it look like Ade was having an intimate meeting with an older, wealthy man. The implication was clear and shameful. The next morning, Funke marched into the dean's office, clutching her phone. She pretended to be reluctant, her voice laced with false concern. "Sir," she began, "I think you should know that one of your students is involved in activities that could harm the school's reputation. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I thought it was my duty to bring this to your attention." She handed the phone to the dean. He frowned as he examined the manipulated image. In the world of Northwood Academy, where reputation was everything, such a scandal was a serious threat. "I will address this immediately," he said, his face grim. After the midday assembly, a notice was sent to Ade's classroom, summoning him to the dean's office. The room buzzed with whispers as he walked out, his head held high, though he had no idea what awaited him. He entered the office to find the dean sitting at his desk, his expression stern. "Ade Okoye," he said, his voice cold, "it has come to my attention that you've been engaging in behavior unbecoming of a Northwood Academy student." He held up Funke's phone, displaying the photo. "This has been brought to me as evidence. Do you deny it?" Ade's eyes widened in shock as he recognized the picture. It was a photo of him with his uncle, taken at his birthday lunch just last week. "Sir," he began, his voice steady despite the accusation, "that's my uncle. He's part of my family." The dean was not convinced. The story fit too neatly with the rumors of Ade's financial desperation. "And how do you explain this setting?" he pressed. "Meeting older, rich men and claiming they are family? This is unacceptable." Before Ade could respond, the door to the office opened. The vice-chancellor, a man known for his fairness, stepped in. He had overheard the commotion, and his expression was grave. "Excuse me, Dean," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Before this goes any further, I must clarify something." The vice-chancellor closed the door behind him, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the room. He walked to the dean's desk and looked at the photo on the phone, then at Ade and finally at the dean. "Ade Okoye," the vice-chancellor said, his tone leaving no room for doubt, "is the son of the board's largest owner, Mr. Okoye." The dean's face went pale. He stared at the vice-chancellor, then at Ade, as if seeing him for the first time. The vice-chancellor continued, his voice sharp with disapproval. "The man in that photo is indeed his uncle, a well-respected member of their family. I suggest you verify your facts before making such serious accusations against a student dean." The room fell into a heavy silence. The foundation of every rumor, every taunt, every judgment against Ade had just been shattered. He was not the poor scholarship boy. He was the quiet heir who had chosen anonymity over an entourage. From the hallway, where she had been waiting to savor her victory, Funke watched the scene unfold through the glass panel in the door. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the dean's shocked expression and the vice-chancellor's authoritative stance. She saw the quiet dignity on Ade's face. Her plan hadn't just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. Panic seized her. She clenched her fists, anger and fear boiling inside her, and slipped away before anyone could see her. Later that day, the truth spread through Northwood Academy like a shockwave. Students who had once whispered about Bike Boy now spoke of the secret billionaire. The story of Funke's lie, though not officially confirmed, was pieced together by the student body. The tide of opinion turned swiftly and mercilessly against her. Cornered and desperate, Funke knew she needed a grander deception, a final undeniable performance to reclaim her status. That evening, she went home with a new scheme already forming in her mind, one that would leverage the only resource she had left, her mother's position within the Okoye household. Funke cornered her mother, Mrs. Adewale, in their small living room. The air was thick with unspoken tension. "I need you to do something for me," Funke began, her tone leaving no room for refusal. She explained her plan, to host a party at one of the Okoye family's mansions, a grand estate where her mother worked as a housekeeper. She would pass it off as her own family's home, the ultimate proof of her wealth. Mrs. Adewale's eyes widened with fear. "Funke, this is dangerous," she whispered. "If Mr. Okoye finds out, I could lose my job. We could lose everything." "He won't find out," Funke insisted, her voice hard. "He's out of the country, and the family never uses that house. Just one night, Mom. I need this. I can't let them think I'm not who I say I am." She saw the hesitation in her mother's eyes and pressed harder. "Daddy is just a driver, but he could use one of Mr. Okoye's cars to take me to school. Those rich people have so many houses, they won't even know one is being used." Reluctantly, worn down by her daughter's relentless ambition and her own secret fears, Mrs. Adewale agreed. The party was a masterpiece of illusion. Funke greeted her classmates at the grand entrance, a gracious hostess in a borrowed kingdom. She led them on a tour, pointing out expensive artwork and designer furniture with an air of casual ownership. Her classmates, including Zainab and Bayo, were in awe. "Funke, this place is incredible," Zainab said, sipping champagne from a stolen flute. "You really are the real deal." Funke smiled smugly, soaking in their admiration, but her confidence began to fray at the edges when one of the students spotted Mrs. Adewale nervously serving drinks in a plain uniform. "Who's that?" the student asked, pointing. Funke's face turned pale. "Oh, just one of the staff," she said quickly. But her classmates noticed the striking resemblance between the proud hostess and the timid housekeeper. "Wait a minute," someone said, frowning. "She looks like you?" Before Funke could deflect, Mrs. Adewale, her hands trembling, accidentally spilled a tray of drinks. The clatter of glass on the marble floor silenced the room. In the awkward hush, someone whispered the question on everyone's mind. "Is that her mum?" "Of course not," Funke stammered, her voice too loud, too defensive. "Don't be ridiculous." The lie was beginning to unravel. As the evening progressed, a butler employed by the Okoye family, who managed the estate even in their absence, entered the main hall. His expression was a mixture of confusion and concern. He had not been informed of any event and was taken aback by the crowd of teenagers. He approached Funke, his demeanor polite but firm. "Miss, may I ask under whose authority this gathering is being held?" Funke, clinging to her facade, responded with haughty indignation. "This is my family's estate, and I am hosting this party. Your interruption is both unnecessary and rude." Some of the students, eager to remain in her favor, chimed in, chastising the butler. "How dare you question Miss Funke?" one exclaimed. "Know your place," another added. The butler's eyes narrowed. He had worked for the Okoye family for over 20 years. He knew every member of the family, and this arrogant young woman was not one of them. Without another word, he stepped aside and made a discreet phone call. Within the hour, the grand doors of the mansion swung open again. This time, the arrivals silenced the music and froze every guest in place. Ade Okoye stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of disappointment and sadness. Beside him stood his father, Mr. Okoye, who had returned from his trip early. His face was calm, but his eyes held an authoritative power that commanded the room. A wave of stunned realization washed over the party. The whispers spread like wildfire, piecing together the final shocking truth. Isn't that Ade, the poor scholarship boy? He's the real heir. We've been deceived. Funke's face drained of all color. She stood frozen, a statue in the center of her collapsing kingdom, unable to process the rapid unraveling of her deceit. Mr. Okoye addressed the stunned crowd, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of absolute authority. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears there has been a misunderstanding regarding tonight's event. Ade's gaze met Funke's. There was no triumph in his eyes, only a quiet sorrow for the girl who had gone to such desperate lengths for a life that wasn't hers. Unable to bear the weight of her exposed lies and the judgmental stares of her peers, Funke turned and fled, pushing through the crowd and out into the night, tears of humiliation streaming down her face. The fallout from the party was swift and severe. The next day, Funke was summoned by the school board. Her scholarship, the one her mother had worked so hard to secure, was revoked. With no way to afford the elite school's fees, she was expelled. The news ripped through the student body, sealing her fate as a social outcast. Her first instinct was to turn to Bio and Zainab, her closest allies. She called and messaged them repeatedly, but her calls went to voicemail and her messages remained unread. She finally caught up with them at a cafe near campus, but their faces were cold and unforgiving. "Bio Zainab," she called out, rushing toward their table. Bio glanced at her, his expression disdainful. "What do you want, Funke?" I need your help," she stammered. "You're my friends." Zainab scoffed, flipping her hair. "Friends with you? Sorry, Funke, but we don't associate with filth." "You lied to everyone," Bio added, his voice flat. "You embarrassed us by dragging us into your fake world. We're done." They stood up and walked away without looking back, leaving Funke utterly alone. The betrayal stung more than the expulsion. The people she had trusted had abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. Sitting there, she felt a surge of bitter resentment. "This is all Ade's fault," she murmured to herself. "Why does he get to be born rich while I am not?" Later that day, she was sitting alone in a park when David approached her. He was the young man from the party who had also pretended to be from a wealthy family, the heir. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a quiet hesitation. "Funke," he began, sitting beside her, "I need to tell you something. I lied to you. I'm not from a rich family. My name isn't even David Eze. I just wanted to match your status because I thought it would impress you." Funke stared at him, a new wave of disgust washing over her. "You're not rich. You're just some nobody?" "I'm sorry," he said, his voice earnest, "but now that the truth is out for both of us, maybe we can start fresh. I care about you, Funke. I always have." Her face twisted into a sneer. "Are you serious? Do you think I'd associate with poverty? I'm going to marry a very rich man, David, or whatever your name is. I'm not staying at the bottom." She stormed off, leaving him heartbroken. Desperation and rage consumed her. The thought of Ade, thriving in the life Funke craved, became an obsession. Revenge was the only thing she had left. In the solitude of her small apartment, a new sinister plan began to form. A way to drag Ade down to her level, to destroy his reputation and happiness. And she knew just the person to help her. She picked up her phone and called David. Using David's lingering feelings for her like a weapon, Funke manipulated him. "I need your help," she said, her voice sweet and persuasive over the phone. "You're the only one I can trust. I want you to help me teach Ade a lesson. He's the reason my life is in shambles. He has to pay." David, still smarting from her rejection, but desperate for her approval, hesitated. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Just kidnap him," Funke said, her tone deceptively casual. "We'll humiliate him, make him understand what it feels like to be powerless." Against his better judgment, clouded by a toxic mix of love and resentment, David agreed. The opportunity came a few nights later. Ade had been studying late at the library, a quiet routine he had established. As he walked home along the dimly lit campus path, David approached, pretending to ask for directions. Before he could realize the danger, he covered his mouth with a chemical-soaked cloth. His world went dark. He woke up in a dusty, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. He was tied to a chair, his head throbbing. Funke paced in front of him, her expression a mask of twisted anger. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" Funke hissed, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "With your perfect life and your billionaire father, let's see how perfect you are now." Ade remained silent, his calm expression only infuriating Funke more. "You won't get away with this," Ade finally said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. "My father will find me." Funke smirked. "Not before I ruin you." She turned to David, who lingered nervously in the shadows. "Do it. Show him what it feels like to be nothing." David's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I mean," Funke snapped, her voice sharp and cruel. "Ruin him. Take his dignity. Make him beg." David backed away, shaking his head. The reality of what Funke was asking him to do crashed down on him. This wasn't a prank. It was a violent, life-altering crime. "No, Funke. This is too far. His father is powerful. He'll destroy us." Funke's eyes burned with fury. "You're a coward," she spat. "You said you'd help me." "I agreed to help you scare him, not this," David said firmly, his voice trembling but resolute. "I won't do it." Funke screamed in frustration. Realizing she couldn't manipulate him further, she pulled out her phone. "Fine, thank goodness I have a backup plan." While Funke's plan fell into chaos, Mr. Okoye had launched a city-wide search. When Ade didn't return from the library, he wasted no time, mobilizing his security team and offering a hefty reward for any information. The news spread quickly. Back at the warehouse, the tension was suffocating. Funke, pacing angrily, barked orders at David, who stood frozen by guilt. Ade, tied to the chair, watched them, his mind racing but his voice calm. "You won't win, Funke," he said. "My father will find me, and when he does, you'll regret this." "I'll handle this myself," Funke snapped, turning away from the useless David. She made a call. "Bring the others," she said coldly. "It's time to finish this." Just as she ended the call, the large warehouse door burst open, flooding the dark space with light. Chidi stood in the doorway, flanked by two of Mr. Okoye's security guards. His face was a mask of cold fury and determination. "Funke, step away from him," Chidi ordered, his voice echoing with authority. Funke froze, the phone still in her hand. "What are you doing here?" she spat. "This has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," Chidi said, moving swiftly toward Ade. He began to work on his restraints. "You've gone too far, Funke. It ends now." David, overwhelmed, stepped back with his hands raised. "I didn't want to do this," he mumbled. "I was only helping her because you're just as pathetic as she is," Chidi interrupted sharply, not taking his eyes off the ropes binding Ade. "You'll both face the consequences for this." Realizing she was out of options, Funke lunged toward Ade in a final desperate act of malice. But Chidi was faster. He stopped her, his grip firm on her arm. "Let him go, Funke," he said sternly. "It's over." Funke's composure finally shattered. She screamed a raw sound of frustration and despair, tears streaming down her face. "He has everything. He's perfect, rich, and loved by everyone. I couldn't stand it anymore." Ade, now free, stood up and looked at the sobbing girl on the floor. There was no anger in his eyes, only a profound sadness. "You could have had friends, Funke," he said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." Funke slumped to the floor, her strength gone. "I hated you," she admitted, her voice a broken whisper, "because you reminded me of everything I'll never be." The wail of sirens grew louder. The police, alerted by Chidi, arrived moments later. Funke and David were arrested on the spot. As they were led away in handcuffs, Funke looked back at Ade one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For everything." Ade didn't respond, but his gaze was one of calm, sad understanding. In the days that followed, Funke faced the full consequences of her actions. Disgraced, expelled, and with a criminal record pending, she was left to confront the ruins of the life she had so desperately tried to invent. The classmates who had once admired her now avoided her name, speaking of her only in hushed, cautionary tones. Bayo and Zainab, when questioned by the police, denied any deep connection to her, painting her as a troubled liar they had merely tolerated. Alone in the small, stark room of a juvenile detention center, Funke finally had no audience. There was no one to perform for, no one to impress, no one to blame but herself. The silence was a heavy blanket, forcing her to reflect on the choices that had led her here. She saw the string of lies, each one bigger than the last, that had woven the trap she now found herself in. She remembered the look of fear in her mother's eyes, the quiet dignity in Ade's, the disgust on David's face. The jealousy and bitterness that had consumed her had promised power and status, but had delivered only pain and isolation. For the first time, stripped of all false show, she understood the true cost of her hatred. It had cost her everything. Ade, meanwhile, recovered with the quiet, calm confidence that defined him. He refused to let the ordeal cast a shadow over his life. He was surrounded by the steadfast support of his father and the quiet, unwavering loyalty of Chidi. He asked his father not to press the harshest charges, an act of grace that puzzled many but was true to his character. He saw Funke not as a monster, but as a sad, lost girl consumed by envy. In the weeks following the ordeal, Ade and Chidi grew closer. Their shared experience had forged a bond deeper than simple friendship. They spent hours talking, walking through the school gardens, sharing their dreams, values, and plans for the future. The noise and drama of Northwood Academy's social scene seemed to fade into the background whenever they were together. One sunny afternoon, as they sat on a quiet bench overlooking the campus, Chidi turned to Ade with a soft smile. "You know, Ade," he said, "you've taught me a lot. It's not about wealth or status. It's about the person you choose to be." Ade smiled back, his gaze warm. "And you've shown me that there are people who will stand by you no matter how tough things get. Thank you for that." Their friendship deepened with each passing day. It was a connection built not on spectacle or status, but on a foundation of trust, kindness, and mutual respect. The whispers at Northwood Academy had finally fallen silent. The story of the fake heiress and the quiet billionaire's son became a cautionary tale, a lesson in the difference between performance and character. Ade continued to ride his bicycle to school. He still wore simple clothes and preferred the library to the limelight. But he no longer felt like a ghost. He had found his place not by conforming to the world around him, but by staying true to himself. The quiet integrity he had chosen had endured, drawing real allies to his side and proving, in the end, that true worth could never be bought, borrowed, or faked. It had to be lived.